Hey there, clarinerds. It's been a while since we've done a video. We've been very busy this summer, and we thank you for your patience and waiting for another video. I think I'd like to start out this year by offering a tribute to one of my main teachers. Now, I had some very good teachers, but I'd say the one that influenced my own ideas the most and was most helpful to me as a player in learning the clarinet and also in understanding the clarinet better was Kalmen Opperman. Mr. Opperman just passed away this past June at the age of 93 in New York City. And I'd like to offer this as kind of a tribute to him, but also a sharing of his basic ideas about clarinet playing and how to go about, say, mastering the beast of clarinet playing best. And I hope these ideas that he shared with me, which were so helpful to me, will also be helpful to you. First of all, where did Mr. Opperman's ideas come from? He just didn't pull them all out of his head. He had some very good teachers himself. Simeon Bellison, who played first clarinet in New York Philharmonic, was one of them. But I'd say his probably main teacher was Ralph McLean, the famous principal of the Philadelphia Orchestra. Ralph McLean was a double-lip player. He had studied with Gaston Hamelin in Boston and also traveled over to France to study with him after Hamelin left Boston. And so his ideas basically came primarily from the French school of clarinet playing. And most of these ideas I'm going to be sharing with you are ideas that were inculcated into those who were trained in the French school. I'd say the single most important idea in all of Mr. Opperman's teaching, the idea that, say, permeated every aspect of his teaching, was the idea of refinement. Let me explain what I mean. Everything we do has a quantitative and qualitative aspect. Let's say quantitatively we're able to play an etude without making any mistakes. Well, that's great. You know, usually when that happens, it's more of an accident than it is on purpose. But let's say that happens. Well, that wasn't enough for Mr. Opperman. He'd say, great, check that etude off and we'll go on. No, he was really interested in the manner in which you did things. The tension in your technique, the way you slammed and banged on the keys, the unevenness from time to time, even though you might get the notes right, all those things were of great concern to Mr. Opperman, and he would really bust you if you came in and started slamming and banging on the clarinet. I remember actually the first time I went to see him, the first thing he mentioned about my playing was that my finger technique made him want to throw up. Well, I worked very hard on that so as not to make my teacher sick, and you know something, my finger technique, it got a lot better quantitatively. I got to where I could play faster and more evenly by working on the qualitative. I've shared some of those ideas in previous videos. If you'd like to see them, you might check back in the numbers. I can't remember which numbers they are, but those were very important concepts, very helpful to me, and something I recommend to you. Improve the quantitative aspect of your technique by working diligently on the qualitative. If the qualitative is imperfect, if you're slamming and banging, it's like trying to run a race with lead in both pockets. One of the other valuable things that Mr. Opperman shared with me were, say, approaches to practice. First of all, he would have you practicing 4 to 8 hours a day. Now you say, gee, you know, my chops, I can't last that long, you know. What he would do is he would recommend that you rest frequently in terms of actually playing the clarinet, say 5 minutes on and 5 minutes off at the most. But what do you do in the 5 minutes off? Well, sometimes you do nothing. Sometimes you think about something else because you're kind of at a roadblock. And then other times, what you do, instead of playing, what you do is visually you go slowly through the passage and you think your way through the passage. You think it over and over. You can be training the fingers without making any sound. And that was a tremendous value to me when I realized that I could actually work on the technique and get my mind. Because most of the time when you miss notes, it's not because you're not making the sound right, it's because you're not thinking right. One of the other things Mr. Opperman was most interested in was practice material. It's very related to his whole idea of working smarter and harder in practice itself. Let me give you an example. For instance, the Rose studies. We all play those. We've had our teachers run us through one row study after another. But the fact is the row studies are not technical studies for the most part. The row studies are musical studies. They're studies for people who already have the music pretty much mastered, have the technical studies pretty much mastered. They have all that down. And what they're doing is concentrating on phrasing and expression and all that. That's essentially what the row studies are for. Well, in each row study, we find 10 or 12 or more specific technical problems that really should be mastered before you go to that etude. Well, Mr. Opperman was about doing the dirty work in every area. He would take students and advanced students that really had basic flaws in their playing because their teachers had neglected to really hit at what was limiting them and holding them back. He would go back and do all that dirty work with tone production and with finger technique. And the practice materials he would have you work on was anything but entertaining. You would work on concentrated, isolated areas of the clarinet that are difficult in technique to master them. And you would do the repetitions over and over and over until these difficult combinations and difficult areas of the clarinet were all smoothed out and you had real control of them. You can see this in the practice materials that he offered in terms of exercise book. For instance, the Modern Daily Studies Book 1. That is a book that should be in the hands of every clarinet player, and they should be working on it every day. Not only does it have these concentrated areas of the clarinet that he works on in each etude, but they're also set so once you master those areas, once you really have them down, you can also go back to the daily studies and review those studies day after day after day in order to, after you develop those techniques, to maintain them. So it's an incredibly useful book. Another book that he used was the Paul Jean-Jean Vadimecum, which is in a sense very similar to the daily studies in the fact that it does concentrate on specific areas of the clarinet and recommend that specific technical things be done in very specific ways. So he taught out of that book as well. I think as a general approach to playing, it really gets you down the road, whereas playing through one row study after another just basically gets you entertained, and you may spend a lot of time practicing, but you're not working very smart. You're basically entertaining yourself instead of getting better and better. I like Mr. Opperman's approach better. The final thing about Mr. Opperman's approach to clarinet playing, and again this permeated everything about the clarinet, was dedication. Mr. Opperman wanted you to be dedicated to the clarinet. He wanted you to invest in the clarinet, to make sure you had the best equipment. He wanted you to spend a lot of time laboring to understand the clarinet. And this was a big revelation to me because he basically helped me understand a lot about what the clarinet was about from the inside. And I realized that understanding the clarinet better actually helped me play the clarinet a lot better. And the better I understood it, the more efficiently I played, and also the higher the average standard of my performance was. So that was very, very helpful to me. He wanted you to be devoted, he wanted you to spend time daily, and he wanted you to sacrifice for the clarinet. When other people were having fun, when other people were out enjoying, say, a Saturday evening, you were there practicing, you were there working. You were working harder, you were working smarter, and because you loved the clarinet, because you loved playing music. And this was, I'd say, this was the thing, this is the umbrella over the whole idea of playing the clarinet. And he contended that this kind of devotion, this kind of activity would not only develop you as a clarinet player, but develop you as a human being. And I think when I look on it now, after all these years, after studying with Mr. Opperman, he was right in both instances.